Hello everyone, welcome to our first episode of The Digital Source. We're here to chat about vouchers, voucher use. Is it good? Is it bad? We're going to talk about everything, whether brands should be adopting it and doubling down, or actually whether there is a pause for concern there. And I'm Luke from Visualsoft, our head of affiliates. Today we're joined by two guests. We have Daniel and Dan, so that's going to make things a little bit difficult for us. But we've got Daniel joining us from Pion, recent rebrand from Student Beans, as I'm sure most of you will recognise, and Dan from Sports Shoes, who is head of marketing there, and Daniel is the affiliate partnerships manager for Pion. So yeah, we're just going to dive straight in with hopefully what will be a really engaging conversation for the audience. So we're going to talk a little bit about the past, a little bit about the present, and then close out with a bit of future, which I think we're all excited for. But thinking back to 2023, and certainly the changing customer demographics, customer confidence, I think customer confidence has taken more hits than we can all kind of remember in recent history. Even though it is on a positive trajectory now, it's certainly lower. I think the lowest it's been since 2015, which is not good. Let's chat a little bit about the challenges that you guys have faced over the last year. So Daniel, starting with you and obviously Student Beans and now it's Pion, what was the biggest challenge last year?
The challenge that comes to mind would have to be the cost of living crisis. I think for us, students, you would be surprised at actually how much extra sort of spending they have. The spending power for this cohort is actually massive. I think when we look at the Gen Z demographic, their cohort is 12 to 26. So we've seen a lot of students graduate, go into the workplace. We are also seeing a lot of students a lot of the younger Gen Z start to become students. Overall, maybe AOV has seen a little bit of a decline, but to be honest, like transactions and overall engagement have gone up. So there has been some wins and losses, but yeah, not all doom and gloom.
And Dan, I guess just a quick comment on that, and then your own thoughts on the biggest challenge as well.
Yeah, I think my thoughts are quite linked to Daniel's. Really around I think last year was the year of value. I think that's what all consumers were looking for last year, and that comes in different shapes and forms. Whether that's lower basket price, whether they're getting additional free gifts or free shipping.
Yeah.
I think we've definitely felt like you mentioned around AOV. Ours has took a little bit of a tumble, but not to the degree that it could have done. I think there's certainly, consumers are certainly more on the ball when it comes to shopping. They want to make sure they're getting value. They will cross-shop. They will Google. They will go back to Google 2 or 3 times to make sure they're getting value. And I think that's our biggest challenge for the last year. I think we've managed to come out of it really well. In our space, a couple of our large competitors across Europe have gone out of business. So I think from our point of view, our biggest challenge was just navigating through the year, making sure that we are still profitable, and we did that incredibly well. And I think that's the key thing for business now. It's not around scale and trying to go for the biggest turnover. Really, it's about being profitable.
Yeah, I would second a lot of that. I think the sentiment that we feel working with a large portfolio of partners and brands is that last year was very much, and I think this year will be the same, is that focus on profitability. And of course, last year was probably the first year out of what was a huge global trend that we had to navigate our way around that. So certainly we've seen a lot of focus on budget optimization, making sure that every penny counts, and not just from the brand side, but also offering customers the best possible price, whilst still remaining profitable for the brand is a challenge, certainly, and a challenge that as an agency we've helped a lot of clients to navigate.
I think just linked to what you just mentioned there around sort of investments and budgets, and traditionally marketing is definitely the team and the I guess the departments that feel it most. Our view on that into like last year, this year, and going forward is actually double down on that. Yeah. Actually, it's an opportunity, and when we look at our peers and competitors, they're reducing spend. We can see they're less active on Google Shopping. They're not doing as many. They're not putting the investment into PMax. They're just not as sophisticated. They're not really hungry. Our view is actually, well, let's take that. Let's take the market share. Let's go for it, and let's grab while we can. Our view for the year is actually partnerships are key. We signed up Parkrun as their global retail partner for a number of years. It's our biggest partnership today. That's over 6 million runners globally. So our view is very much, let's go for it.
And I suppose, Daniel, from any partner's perspective, it's a challenge getting brands to, commit to that spend, that budget. It's a constant conversation, but that must be music to your ears.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, you look at what sort of during COVID, travel died. But, I think in the last year where maybe consumers have become a little bit more conscious of their wallets, they are actually spending more smartly as well. And I think that, Gen Z today, young people today, they're perhaps not the, maybe not the sober generation, but, they're not spending all their money at the pub on a Friday night. They're actually looking for experiences. They're looking to go away with their friends and family. Some sectors have maybe seen a bit of a hit, but I'd also say that there's some that are coming back with a bang and a real vengeance as we go into this year.
Which is super positive. I think, what I'm really keen to highlight is that, these trends are changing and that there is a positive outcome. We mentioned consumer confidence. Yes, it has tanked over the last few years. We could go through the list of things that's, really impacted that negatively. But certainly in the last 12 months, it's started that rise again. And whilst still low over a 5-year period, it is on the rise. And I think, you mentioned travel died during COVID. I agree that now people are looking to, spend a little bit more and actually get back onto that travel boat and really get those experiences in, which actually I think from a retail perspective, Dan, is how do you guys fit into that experience? Rather than thinking of it yourselves as just a product, it's the track, it's the whole piece that comes around the product, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, I think we don't see ourselves as just an online retailer.
Yeah,
really we see ourselves as the most offline digital retailer. So we're partnered with obviously Parkrun. We've got 250 races every year that we're either a partner with or we put on, including our own podium series. So our view is that even if you're an online retailer, you don't have to stay online. You can still have physical touch points with the consumers, and ultimately that is just going to help grow brand awareness.
You guys have got your biggest podium event in March, is it? Or very soon?
Yeah, we've got podium festival, so it'll be 1,000 to 2,000 runners with a prize purse of over £30,000, which in UK running scene, for the keen runners listening, that's just unheard of. Like, that just doesn't happen. And it scales up from there if records are broken. So from our point of view, we want to put excitement into our space. Whether that's these events that are just an experience. They're not there. We're not there to sell any product at all. That's not what they're there for. They're not there to turn a profit. Really, it's around engaging. Are those the same consumers that go to our events that are opening every single one of our emails and that follow us on Instagram and watch our YouTube clips or follow us on Strava? These are all the touch points that we want to get hold of and really understand, who are our best consumers and who are the ones that we need to help nurture. We call it our ecosystem. We have a great slide and we love it. We parade it around to all the brands and retailers. And it's like, this is what we're about. This is literally sportshoes.com and this is our ecosystem. It's everything from online, offline, social, content, editorial, our mobile site experiences, all the tools on site. That's how we try and connect the consumers to us. But the data's really, lacking. And it's now, how can we knit that together? And is that AI? Is it a third-party tool? I think a lot of consumers, don't really appreciate actually what goes on there.
Yeah.
They expect a really personalised service, and it's like, well, actually, that's quite tricky to get to.
You mentioned a few things there that I'd like to kind of touch on a little bit more, which is that sense of kind of community around the brand. Everything that you mentioned there is essentially growing that customer base, and it's not all about discount. You mentioned that you go to these podium events, and it isn't just offering discounts to everybody that's there. In fact, there was no mention of kind of offers and promotions in any of that material, but the sense of community. Bringing it back to you, Daniel, ultimately we are in a discount culture. I guess consumer spend power is lower than we'd like it to be. How would you see something in terms of the benefit space kind of being able to feed into some of those community pieces? Should we be avoiding it and just moving away from offering customers benefits and just double down on the community elements? Or actually, is there a place where these things can live harmoniously?
Every consumer today is, they care about value and they want more than just a product. They want to feel attached to your brand. They want you to engage with their values, whether it be their social values. They just want you to be able to speak to them, I think. So I think that is really key. When it comes to, I guess, rallying or embracing it, I think it has to be a bit of both. I see the argument for both sides. I think brands that view discount culture, if you like, as a blanket approach, that's not going to work. So I think ultimately, if you have a strategy to offer a gated, secure, reliable offer to then get that customer in, then you can hit them with loyalty, community stuff, then that customer is going to really buy into your brand. So I think for us, it's a lead generation tool to, provide that gated offer. It's a basket abandonment tool. As I've mentioned as well, that Gen Z are, they're digitally native, they're so tech savvy. I think they can find a voucher code within 15 seconds. So it's a bit, if you're not offering it, they'll go somewhere else.
We often see that customers are basically put into buckets, which is the discount hunter, let's call it, versus kind of the full price purchaser. And we often try to prescribe certain values to each of those people, which is that the discount hunter is ultimately only going to buy when a physical discount percentage is available from the brand, whereas we try to hunt a little bit more in this other space, which is the higher value perceived customer. But the reality is that actually a lot of people, they will start as a discount user because they don't know the brand and they don't have loyalty. But once we've got them in, then we have to start thinking about how we can then actually embed them within the experience, as opposed to just offering more discounts. And I think that is a critical point for a lot of retailers out there, for all those watching, that it shouldn't be viewed as a do or not, but potentially it's one thing leading to another, which is the acquisition of a very price conscious customer, particularly in the element of student where cash is not unlimited, but then actually as that customer matures, they stay with the brand. And I guess, Dan, you mentioned a few good points in that earlier, which is trying to stay away from just always offering discounts in order to get the next sale.
Yeah, I think our one of our big challenges is around incrementality.
Yeah,
and how can you track that as well? Was I going to get that order or not? Were you going to order with us without that discount? And do you want to take that risk? And how much is it worth to you? So, that's our big challenges around incrementality. And, we work with student beans. We have them for a long time. And even now, it's like, well, were they going to shop with us?
Yeah.
Or actually, would I prefer to guarantee it? Do I want that higher conversion rate?
That is an existential question there, Dan. So this is a question that we get asked a lot, and I think I like to think of it like it's a Jenga tower, and at the moment it's standing up and everybody's happy, but we start pulling these things out, and actually very quickly it can all fall apart because there was a critical touch point there. Daniel, I guess that you guys must get this question or something very natively linked to it all of the time.
I think for us, it's about, positioning ourselves as a full funnel publisher. Obviously through the affiliate channel, we are known, now being Pion, I think that will definitely help because it really brings our, you mentioned that the word ecosystem for us is so important because it really ties in together our insights, our advertising arm with verification. So if you think of it in reverse order, not starting with verification, all this top of funnel work that we can do to help brands engage with. So it's not just about getting the student and offering them a discount, it's about building better relationships. And obviously we do that with students. We've been Gen Z experts for almost 20 years, but over the last few years we have started to we've launched a marketplace for graduates. We offer 7 additional consumer groups for healthcare, military, teachers, etc. And that's all based off brand feedback. So we listen to our brands, they want to engage with additional consumer groups. So yeah, I guess my point is it's not just about starting with the offer. It's about, get to know your target audience through insights. Can you better understand, what makes them tick?
So I think this is really key, actually, which is that dialogue between the brand and the partner, the provider. I think when there is a dialogue, the questions can be answered, tactics can be changed, and actually we can pull in that upper funnel activity. We often don't know the full scope of what is available, and we see that activity and we take action to stop it, and then it's done at that point, but the feeling is left, which I guess leads on really nicely to kind of the data and the tracking side of things. And just a quick word on that, and you mentioned earlier your major pain point in the industry being GA4, but how are you guys finding that whole data piece and trying to get to the truth of your true view?
Our data is a bit siloed. It's not very well connected. So we're quite fortunate to have a new CTO join the business 2 years ago, who's really sort of reforming all of that and transforming it into a more closer single-minded view.
Yeah.
But there's still a long way to go, and I think again it comes down. There's a little, I feel like there's a bit of an AI part to play in this, which will certainly help. Otherwise, you could argue, well, I need a team of 10 data people. Because,
Yeah.
you know, we've got millions of consumers, millions of touch points, and I want to try and do some predictive analysis on that. And I think, you know, there are certainly two camps of consumers. You've got people that are happy to be premium and pay full price every time, and yet retailers, and including us sometimes, you'll still send them a discount, but probably didn't need to do that.
Yeah.
But I needed the data to tell me that.
Daniel, just to bring it back to you guys, and you mentioned earlier that, you know, a huge arm of Pion is this upper funnel kind of research, customer research piece. How do you see that working to, I guess, assist brands like Sport Shoes with answering these questions?
Embrace the data, I think, has to be the tagline for that. We rely a lot on affiliate networking tracking, so I think to just have another source and to have it track each event, you know, I think events is the kind of term that Google are going to use, I think will actually be really key, and it'll help us see, you know, what part of the journey have we been involved in? You know, it's not just hopefully last click, you know. Ultimately, it boils down to that trust and transparency, and what you were saying earlier on, it's about having that communication. So I think, yeah, just being able to share all the data, you know, what is that sort of one truth source? But yeah, having more points will definitely help.
We ultimately still need the answer, right? Which is the key thing. When we're making decisions about budget and you know, what's working and what isn't, we ultimately need an answer that we can trust. And I think, you know, this is where tools that you mentioned earlier come into it. And some of those are AI-driven tools. Some of those are just, you know, tools that have jumped into the market since this transition to GA4. But I think there's still a massive value in understanding customer engagement and events, and not just prescribing, you know, the win to one particular thing, and understanding that it is a series of channels that are involved. But I guess the challenge is budget, and where do we spend our money for the maximum benefit. And historically, it's potentially been that, you know, partners like Student Beans have lost out. Do we think we've got to a point where customer loyalty is, and I don't want to say it, has died? I don't think it has, but certainly there's a lot of perception that, you know, customers are far less brand loyal than maybe they once were. Starting with Dan, actually, as the brand in the room, but how do you guys feel about customer loyalty?
It's a great question. I feel like I firmly believe there are two camps of consumers. You know, those that are loyal and they want the experience, they want a service that's exceptional, and they're happy to pay the premium for it. And then you've got some consumers who are not loyal. You know, they're not really brand loyal, and that's coming from a branded retailer. You know, they want something that fits their needs, and hopefully they want to pay no more than they have to for it. Yeah. And I feel like whether that's Amazon, whether that's eBay, even whether it's pre-owned now, you know, there's a whole new arena.
The reseller network.
You know, people want something for a purpose, and, you know, they're just not willing to pay for that premium service that, you know, we as we've talked about here, we invest an awful lot into our businesses, into our tech and into our teams. But if people aren't willing to pay the price for that, they will just go somewhere else. So it's a really tricky balance, I would say. But I think there are consumers that are still loyal, and they're the ones that you've got to nurture and look after. You know, when we look at our cohorts, you know, we see those really exceptionally loyal customers. They'll spend time and time again, 5 times a year. Their lifetime values are enormous. We almost need to wrap them in cotton wool. Just look after them. They're the babies. We've got to look after them. And really everyone else, you know, they're going to come in and out of the market over the next 5 years. We might get them as a student, but we know that we're up against a really tough market.
And of course, in almost every instance, that cotton wool pot is a lot smaller than we would like it to be.
Yep.
Ultimately, we want to get as many customers into that pot as possible, but the lion's share are still in the other pot, unfortunately. And that brings us on quite nicely, I think, Daniel, to kind of your views on customer loyalty.
Yeah, I think... Yeah, he hit the nail on the head, and I echo all of that. I think brands are under the spotlight more now than ever so before, in terms of, you know, customers are loyal until they're not because of X, Y, Z. I think that brands been under the spotlight in terms of, you know, not just the product, but, you know, what is their political stance, you know, what is their social views, what are
sustainability.
Exactly, yeah. So how do they operate, and how are they navigating through, you know, different trends? Because, you know, the young people, you know, they're so switched on in terms of, you know, being socially conscious, as I've mentioned a couple of times. So yeah, I think loyalty is up for grabs, but at the same time, if you're not just, if you're not just trying to get that customer for today, and you are actually speaking to them as an individual. Because although we talk about demographics and we label them, which, you know, it's what our industry is about, you know, we're youth marketing specialists at Pion, we talk about Gen Z a lot. And, you know, Gen Z are ultimately, it's the biggest consumer audience that's ever existed. The spending power is the largest that's ever existed. So I think it's maybe not worry about them being loyal, it's just trying to be authentic and engage with them in a way that it, you know, isn't fake and isn't trying to be too authentic in terms of like your authenticity has to be sincere, which is a difficult thing to do.
And, you know, I think some retailers, some businesses do a really good job of presenting that authenticity really well. And you get a feeling straight away that actually this is in the bones of the business, whether it is sustainability, whether it's, you know, the sourcing of the products, and there's a whole host of things that I think certainly Gen Z and Gen Alpha are super interested and really quite aware of. But at the same time, a lot of brands get it wrong, and, you know, it's a page on the website, and actually it's immediately apparent that it's not actually part of the business's kind of ethos and you know, ethics and everything else. Like what kind of advice, and I guess going back to Dan, would you give for, you know, businesses looking to build a community but so that it feels organic?
Yeah, I think ultimately you've got to be true to your business values and what you're trying to put out there. You know, it's got to tally, it's got to match. You know, it's pointless trying to be all this squeaky clean business that's ultra sustainable. People are going to see straight through that now. Like just doing that is probably not great advice. I would make sure that it's properly done, audited, and it's authentic to the brand. You're not just doing it to tick a box. Every single touch point has to be authentic and real and as great as it can be, whether that's your order confirmation page where you're telling them a bit about the business or what they can do next, or actually, well, here's a hub full of non-sales content. Give them something to come back for now that they've made their transaction. Or whether that's an email CRM program that really just tells them more about the business that they've just shopped from. Actually, why we do an amazing job, why we're market leading. And again, it might inspire them to do more or come back and shop more. You know, as a consumer myself, and I see this, it's when somebody sends me a communication, whether that be text, push, or email, and there's no relevance, or it's the wrong gender, and I'm just like, it's better to do nothing than do something wrong.
Yeah, to do it badly.
Like just wait. You know, just keep that opt-in. You know, you're not pushing me away right now. But if you push a female product in a category that I'm not interested in, and that's your only notification, I'm like, they don't know me.
Yeah,
I don't want to give them my data. I really want to come out of that, and I'm going to uninstall that app because if they don't know me enough from what I've purchased, like there's just no space for that now.
Yeah,
you have to be better.
And I think it's having respect for your audience as well, that they understand the product that they're buying, they understand the sector that you're within, and also that they do value their data and their time. And I think once we have that respect for the consumer, as opposed to just a number on a spreadsheet that exists somewhere, then we do take it a lot more seriously, and the campaigns become significantly stronger off the back of that, which I think actually sets us up quite nicely to chat a little bit about the future, which we've done a little bit already, but I wanted to kind of kick off a little bit with a topic that is potentially more divisive now than it has been, but it's been building, which is the topic of AI and artificial intelligence. And I think our view is that 2023 was the year that it blossomed and became kind of globally known. It's been there forever in one way or another, but it took center stage in 2023, but it wasn't the year of full adoption. I feel like 2024 might be the year of full adoption and kind of really figuring out where AI fits, where it has value. We were chatting a little bit earlier and chatting about the creative versus kind of data and mathematical analysis. And you guys know that I sit on the side of, I think, crunching numbers fits perfectly for these kind of tools. Not so sold on the creative side of things. I think human touch is absolutely needed there. But starting with you, Daniel, I guess from a Pion's perspective, like, are you using any of these tools? And if you are or aren't, how do you see that growing in 2024?
You know, to be honest, I don't think our teams have adopted AI in terms of using it in our business. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if our data team, as you said, the experts that will probably rely on these tools going forward, will have tested some machine learning products, maybe to understand, you know, predicts like consumer behaviors, you know, maybe what offers are good to promote at certain times. But As far as I'm aware, it's not something that we've embedded across the business.
Yeah.
But definitely on maybe like an individual basis, I'm sure, you know, some people are using it in their day-to-day as more of like an assisted tool rather than...
Experimented.
Exactly, yeah. You know, maybe don't say that to our like copywriters. You know, I went to post something on LinkedIn yesterday, and it came up with the, do you want to change this with AI? And I actually tested it out, and it changed everything into dollars. It just seemed so scripted, and I thought it's taken away all my personality. So I think in terms of using it, like that's very low level. You know, I think, as you said, that the data team should start to adopt it.
On the creative side, we've all seen some very impressive AI generated imagery. There's no doubt that technology has dramatically, you know, grown in the last year alone. But it passes the first glance test. But upon inspection, it is still very lacking, and you know, it isn't a replacement. It's a tool, essentially, to help you know, an artist or, you know, a creative media expert to, you know, produce the content they need to produce. You mentioned there, you know, ChatGPT just changing everything into dollars and taking away your soul that is being put into that article. It's a slippery slope if done badly.
Yeah.
Where we think that there's a huge benefit as well is in that data piece.
Yeah. I think there was a bit of a fear factor as well, like early on last year when it was clearly going to be the hot topic, and, you know, everyone's, you know, depending on what role you sit in, you think of AI, or could it replace me? But when, you know, computer programs came about, like, graphic designers didn't disappear. Do you know what I mean? They were able to utilize these tools, and actually more graphic designers started to get employed in the workplace because they were able to use these tools. So I think if we can look at AI in that way, and, you know, more experts can start to use these tools as part of their arsenal, then I think it is a great thing.
There are huge upsides, you know, particularly when you look at like coding and development. You can see there's efficiencies there, but it's certainly not going to replace people, like you said. I don't ever see that happening. I can just see it as being supplementing, like you said, our arsenal. And I think that will give the team great tools. I think, like you said, it's not a creative play for me at all. I feel like it's a data play.
Yeah.
And I think it's powerful. You know, we're dabbling with bits of machine learning and predictive analytics. But, you know, I think it's got a long way to go. I think our biggest barrier internally is just trust.
Yeah.
It's actually like, well, how can I trust that? Because I haven't done the data myself, and there's no way of me really validating that.
And you don't know how it got to the conclusion.
I'm like, that's a huge leap. So, and I think it'll be the bigger players that make the leaps first, and everyone else will follow. Because it's like, well, if they're using it, then it's clearly a good tool. It's clearly helping them. There will be an adoption, but I think it's going to take a number of years.
And I think that leads on quite nicely to another topic, which Daniel, you mentioned a little bit earlier, which was influencers, and you know, in particular, micro and nano influencers. And I think I've personally held the view for a few years now that, you know, the micro and the nano influencers are where influencer marketing is going to be. The macro influencers have lost something, I mean, and also incredibly expensive, and, you know, perhaps the trust is lost there. How do you guys at Pion see the micro and nano space evolving?
Well, firstly, on the macro influencer, I think they just lack authenticity. I think as we've all become more aware of, you know, ad and what it is, if it's a product that, I don't know, it's just, you see, is it Chris Rock who's up on some billboards at the moment in the UK advertising casinos, and there's just no authenticity about that. So I think that's maybe where the macro influencer has kind of fallen behind, but I also think it's because people want to see an unfiltered, unedited, maybe seeing a product being used as well. Like, I think the data tells us that, like, Gen Z, you know, the young generation, they're 10 times more likely to convert through a peer-to-peer influencer. They want to see them engaging with the product, you know, real results as well, good or bad. It doesn't always have to be all the shiny new product, look what it's done for me. Sometimes they can actually have an unbiased opinion, and I think, again, that builds that community with that influencer, whether it be micro or nano. We definitely see the results, and I think it's going to be a massive growth area. And I think if you look at, you know, the growth across some of the networks that have launched their own creators platform, and the amount of influencers that are signing up to these platforms, it's just a telling of kind of how big that space is.
So I think, you know, our view has changed over the last few years. We used to seed an awful lot of product out to a lot of influencers of various sizes, But the brands have obviously sort of got onto that now. It's like, well, the biggest following is usually snapped up and sponsored, and they're paid an extraordinary amount of money to keep them exclusive to that brand.
Yeah.
I think our view is that we want key opinion leaders, people that are authentic, like you say. I think that's the key thing. But I do think consumers are starting to see through that. Actually, if it's got an ad, it's like, well, does that fit to that personality of the person I followed for years? Or are they just doing that because there's a decent paycheck there?
Perhaps a lot of the audience will be looking at or have looked at influencers and found that budget is the biggest barrier, of course. And actually, I think that barrier is eroding more and more with the advent of micro and nano influencers. And you mentioned the availability now of those tools and those influencers to be able to actually leverage it fully. And I think that's going to be a huge benefit for smaller brands who are looking for those thought leaders, for those really authentic people. So I think it's about being strategic about how we actually work with these influencers, and perhaps moving away from macro makes this easier because there is more human conversation to be had at the micro and nano level, as opposed to a PR agency that has a prescribed way of working and so on and so forth, which I guess I'm really just quite curious in some future predictions from you guys, just in general. So Dan, I guess we'll start with you, but give us a bit of a glass ball prediction for the future.
Well, it's a good question. I would think there's going to be a bigger reliance on key opinion leaders, influencers, and a nano scale. I think that's going to be a bigger channel. I can see that becoming a big thing.
Yeah.
But I think in order for that to happen, I think the platforms have got to come with it and enable them. I think that's the key thing. So I think that's going to be a big switch. I think people are going to start reducing their spends in Google and reduce the reliance on PMax and go more into editorial content, more into YouTube. I feel like there's going to be a big diversification there around traffic sources and investment, and I think I'm here for that. I feel like that'll be great for everybody, and ultimately the consumers will benefit from enriched content on YouTube or TikTok. Everyone will benefit there, rather than it being just about CPCs and how much you're willing to spend.
More budget.
Yeah, I feel like that's where I can see it going. I hope it goes that way.
Yeah, me too. Daniel?
I know we've just talked about it, but I'd have to say the creators and influencer space, I think it's just going to become more intertwined with affiliate marketing, performance marketing. We've known about the influencer for a while, but I think it's growing massively, and especially the way the affiliate networks have started to adopt and launch their own platform really kind of backs that up. Another trend for me, I think, is it has to be the bounce back of travel. I think we saw it bounce back last year, but I think it's just going to continue to evolve this year. So I think it's how do brands sort of pivot and adapt to helping consumers plan long term for like bookings, but also how do they capture them short term. And that's probably my kind of two trends, is the creators and then the travel industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just to add my kind of flavour to that as well, I think a lot of brands are now going to be pushed into action on sorting out their data. I think we were plain sailing with GA3, and we've had a bit of a stumbling point in the road there. And actually, I think 2024 is going to be the year where we have to get on board with this change in how data is handled and how it's used. I think that's going to be a major component of this year. I think it goes without saying that AI will be adopted more and more. I think we'll learn to trust it more and more. I think it'll have some stumbling blocks along the way, which is natural with any emerging technology. And absolutely, I mirror the point of I think the influencer space it's existed for a while now, and it's gone through peaks and troughs of varying different pieces of engagement. I feel like, again, this year, maybe into next year, is the year where we will finally see that space settle and potentially live within the world of affiliate. And I think that'll be the entry point for a lot of companies, a lot of brands into the world of influencers. And that wraps us up, guys. And so thank you very much for coming in to chat to us. It's been great.
Thank you.
Awesome.